My name is William Nixon. I'm Deputy Executive Director of RLUK, and it's my privilege and pleasure to share the stage very briefly with two excellent speakers. So just for the absence of doubt, you should be in harnessing the transformative potential of generative AI in research libraries. So this session is going to share some of the experiences of Ithaka and the University of Leeds libraries in their work with these AI technologies. Ithaka kind of brings nearly 5 years of working with AI into this conversation with an emphasis on the research work done by Ithaka S+R and some practical delivery of generative AI supported by capabilities of the JSTOR platform. And the University of Leeds, who we'll hear from first with Masood Khokar, latterly of our board and our chair, is going to build on insights from Ithaka's research and share a case study on how they're leveraging recent advances in generative AI to enhance their role as digital pioneers.
But also, thank you for giving me the chance to talk about the Leeds story so far. And before that, just a little bit of a disclaimer. I recognize that every organization and every institution is different. This is not a blueprint, this is a story. So let me start by saying that. And what we are hoping to do is give you some ideas of what might work in your place, if that makes sense, but also give you that idea to challenge us back on why you did it that way, or actually have you thought about that? Because this conference is a great learning opportunity, including for all of us. So I'm very eager to learn back in that regard. I must also say there's a lot of content on the slides that is purely so people can ask questions afterwards. If you're reviewing this with your teams, etc., I'm not going to go through all of this in this session. So I also recognize that we have some international colleagues amongst us, so maybe just a little bit of a flavor of what University of Leeds is. So we're a large university in the context of UK. We have about 40,000 students, 10,000 staff, and it's a glimpse of multiple spaces we have. We were given our charter in 1904, so we're over 100 years old university now. And we also have a fantastic set of libraries. We have 5 libraries, 4 on campus, 1 off-site. We have Brotherton Research Center. We have 2 public access galleries. And also, we developed in 2021 a 10-year vision, or a 9-year vision, to be honest, called Knowledge for All. And that does still guide us and give us the North Star direction that we are often looking for in terms of what we are going to do in the future. Right. I will start with this question because instead of directly jumping into AI, let me start by just talking about digital for a second. And one of the reasons why sometimes we worry about digital is we don't seem to have control over it. And it's gone really, really fast. And we've seen Google Books come in and scan everything. And we've seen lots of big tech companies generating their monopolies. And the big question is actually, what do we do? Have we actually just lost the battle? And I think it's really important in those situations to go back to our core purpose. And the short answer is actually no, we haven't lost the battle. But the slightly longer answer is that we should really think about what is our core purpose. And for me, that is about knowledge. And being able to access knowledge or give people to access knowledge, being able to increase that knowledge, being able to preserve that knowledge. But what we have seen is a massive shift from an analog kind of model to a digital model. I also know as librarians and as information professionals, we've been actually pioneering some of this, right? We've been doing quite speedily process with electronic records management, with electronic access to resources, etc. So it's not a matter of actually we're not good at it. It's just a matter of have we looked at it with the widest lens that we can? And that would be an important question as we go into the AI discussion as well. So one of the slides that I sometimes use is what is the problem domain? And I like to call the 4 C's of this problem domain. Firstly, comfort. And for those who know me, I absolutely love my cat. So wherever I can insert a picture of a cat in my slides, I will always do that. There is a tendency that we do become comfortable, and sometimes we don't feel the same challenge as we should as part of that continuous development. And there is an element of truth in that. There's also an element of self-depreciation in that as well. But comfort is our biggest enemy in today's world. So that's one thing I would say. Linked with that is confidence. What we do really well. What we don't do, we often feel not confident about tackling it. That links into experimentation, that links into just trialing something. Absolutely brilliant presentation by Graham, and the first thing I said to him afterwards was, this is an amazing cultural shift, because what you're doing is experimentation and learning, and that's a really, really positive sign. So confidence to just experiment is a really, really critical thing that we haven't fully embraced across the place. And as I said with a disclaimer, there will be huge variability in our organizations on this. Control. Sometimes we want full control over everything because we like to have full control. And sometimes we complain that we have no control, and therefore we shouldn't even tackle it, like with what's happening with generative AI and other places. And then also there's a capability question. Are we developing our capability fast enough? So with that, there's also a solution domain with the library hat on. And one of the first things I often talk about is, actually, let's talk about our core purpose again. Libraries as knowledge hubs, libraries as knowledge platforms. And colleagues who have spoken with me about lovely, lovely publishers, sometimes not so lovely publishers, ACS is quite hot on our minds at this time. We really need to come out of this procurement-only mindset at this time. We really need to think about, what are we going to do with all this content? How are we going to harness the most of this content for the benefit of our users and our society? And it goes back to that social purpose element again. And that is, for me, a knowledge hub, not a procurement body. AI and libraries are a really strong match, because AI and libraries allow us to talk about technology, but also our values, ethics, privacy, and that is so, so needed in today's world, doing things ethically. And for those who are watching the news at the moment, particularly within the US landscape, you're very, very well aware of the kind of things that are happening there. A growth mindset, I won't go into details. We've heard many, many kind of conversations and presentations about why that is so important. And also developing some really strong long-term partnerships. We cannot, again, not just something that's unique. We've talked a lot about building above library partnerships, above campus partnerships, but now is a really, really important time for that, whether that's UK governmental agenda about building partnerships for better efficiencies, or whether that's just an international agenda on doing it for more equitable knowledge and more equitable technologies in the future. Right, just very quickly, back in 2021, when we developed that vision, Knowledge for All, we were thinking about what would technologies mean for our future. And I've picked 3 different strategic priorities from there, and I actually can't read, and I've forgotten my glasses as well, so I'm going to try to remember what I said on the slides. But on strategic priority 2, we were talking about data analytics and machine learning at that time. Have we actually done it really well? No, but is it on our mind? Absolutely. Then we were talking about strategic priority 3, which was about developing more stronger research partnerships on the cusp of digital technologies, digital humanities. And I'm so, so glad Simon is here, who leads our Digital Creativity and Cultures Hub, which is a joint partnership between Library and Leeds Arts and Humanities Research Institute. And that's one of our initiatives that has come out of that. And then we were also talking about actively pursuing technologies. Not very, very many library strategies talk about actively pursuing technologies, but for the benefit of our users. And we were looking at 3 technologies. And by the way, this is all before ChatGPT even emerged in our consciousness. We were talking about linked data, artificial intelligence, and extended reality as the 3 core technologies that we might explore over the next 9 years. So as a consequence of that, we hired our very first research officer in libraries back in 2022, Dr. Luba Pegova-Morgan. And this is the irony of the structures of our institute. So what we really wanted was a research fellow, but we were told, you're a library, you're not an academic unit, so you cannot have a research fellow. So we actually had to call it a research officer just to get away from that kind of thing. And these are the systemic problems that we've seen in some other workshops where we are talking about how do we get rid of some of the obstacles that are in our way to be more research entities. Luba was absolutely fantastic. She'd conducted multiple expert interviews across the globe, surveys, etc., and then released a report, which was originally going to come out in November 2022, and then big thing happened in November 2022 when ChatGPT became public, and Luba was like, nope, I'm going to pause this, I'm going to do more interviews, see the implications, so we released it in July 2023. It's partly outdated already, but there are still some really good insights in there, so do encourage you to go and have a look. But that also helped us build our position across the institution. So as a library talking about AI, we were then able to say, actually, when ChatGPT became big and the institution like, ooh, what are we going to do about it in teaching and learning? What are we going to do about it in research assessment? They looked at the library, primarily because we've already positioned ourselves, but also because we are interdisciplinary. We are cutting across all those agendas. So that was really, really interesting from a political positioning viewpoint. We are also developing our own AI roadmap, and Claire Knowles, I'm not sure if she's here, but she's leading on that initiative. So if you want to talk more specific about what library is doing, you can. And also, one of the key things that we picked from this is our role as a convener and honest broker. We can bring a lot of different units of the organization together, and Claire is there, by the way, and we can really, really strongly build that consensus wherever we can. That also led us to governance. So we created the university created two groups called WAIS and WAITER. WAIS stands for Working Group on Artificial Intelligence in Student Education. We love our acronyms, don't we? And WAITER stands for Working Group on Artificial Intelligence Technologies in Research. Our research data manager was sitting on WAITER. I was co-chairing WAIS with the Dean for Student Education. Again, that strengthening of positioning in those governance groups as well. We also sponsored the very first digital summit of the institution, an idea that just spurred, and we said, why don't we do it on AI? It's a big topic. So we brought in quite a few external companies, Microsoft, Anthology, Blackboard, et cetera, We brought a lot of our own researchers. This was an internally focused event. Simon was there, many other people were there. And we generated conversations around what does AI mean for you? And the success was people talk about it, and that started that conversation. But what was really, really interesting is in these pictures, almost every senior leader of the institution is there. So our DVC for Student Education, our DVC for Research, our Dean for Digital Transformation, our Chief Operating Officer, they're all involved in this discussion, which is one of the most powerful ways to position the library in that domain. We then decided we are going to do a Microsoft 365 Copilot trial, but we didn't want to do it ourselves, so we said, okay, library, IT, and digital education service combined together. We procured, roughly speaking, about 200 to 250 corporate licenses. And in all honesty, the outcome of that was okay. We did a 6-month trial, and Microsoft would claim that you can reach 30% efficiency. Generally speaking, our efficiency rates were about between 8 to 9%. And the reason behind that was, and this is not Copilot's fault, even though Copilot is not, at that time, was not as mature as ChatGPT in some of its outcomes. It was also how we promoted it, because we were trying to keep it very hush-hush. It costs a lot of money. So we're trying to see how do we build that momentum and see the results behind it. We are extending this trial for another year now, and this time we are talking more openly about that. We also took the lead on policy and guidance development. So our learning development team was absolutely instrumental in developing guidance for students, developing guidance for staff, including PGR. So we did some more work on PGR guidance development. The overall website control is in our hands, so we are updating the website through and through. And again, it's all about, so my whole talk is about strategic positioning, really. So it was about that strategic positioning of library in these conversations, as well as events, etc. But what was really good, again, is that the content was not just us. It was digital education service, it was us, it was organizational development and professional learning, all bringing their own angles to this conversation. And also, using our convening and brokering role, we were able to pick lots and lots of different threads on what matters to our researchers, what matters to our educators, what matters to our professional services, to develop a sense of institutional AI roadmap. We had loads of conversations. We've had conversations with Oxford, Yale, Carnegie Mellon, many other parts across the board to really understand what they are doing in their particular institutions. And we then decided these are the kind of components that will be essential to develop a more holistic approach. So far, people have just gone ahead and done their own things, and that was by design. You cannot control something that's running at this pace, and institutional governance are very slow to handle that. So now we're saying, okay, before it becomes so out of control, let's try to bring it into a more holistic framework. And that's what this is doing. Now, there are lots of components, and we can't do them all, but what we've been able to do is the following. So we've now got an institutional position statement. It's not published yet, but it's about to be published in the next few days. And it's a principles-based, values-based implications of AI and what we are going to use it for. We have streamlined the governance significantly. So Waze and Waiter are going to disappear. We're going to have a single working delivery group of 5 people, and that would be it. And we will have an academic and professional consultation group, which will provide expertise. We will have 2 DVCs who will provide the overall leadership for or sponsorship for the initiative. So we've got super streamlined governance now in this area, just to avoid all the hassles and the delays that come from committee structures, as you would be very familiar in higher education institutions. Operation delivery is currently in progress. So operational delivery is both financial and operational. And what we've been able to do, which goes to the finances, is using this support, using this momentum, using this strategic positioning, able to get a good chunk of strategic development fund. And all of that fund is coming to the library rather than to any other part. It's not going to IT, it's not going to digital education service. It will all come to the library to then operate for the best and the widest benefit of the institution. So roughly speaking, over the next 3 years, we'll be dealing with about £3.5 million that we'll spend on some of these things. I'm going to move away from some of the other things. Infrastructure, there's a slide, so I'll talk more about it over there. Partnerships, as I mentioned some, but again, there's a slide on that. Pump priming is another thing we're looking at, and that's institutional pump priming, but we are going to dedicate at least 3 pump priming activities around collections and what we can do with collections. And again, that's where some of the work that Ithaka and JSTOR are doing is absolutely amazing, and I have the privilege of being on the JSTOR Library Advisory Board, so get to see that firsthand. And also communities are being developed around the topic of AI, but also AI's intersection with digital education, digital research, etc. Right. One of the key things is to make AI tangible, because it's, as a concept, is big and broad. So what we said was, okay, we will develop a series of use cases that are going to solve real business problems. And that's what we've been working with, that convening role across the institution. So just to give you some examples, we've got quite a few of these cases. But timetabling is one of them. So we have a timetabling system, but there are so many conflicts that come through. So how do we do that more intelligently? But one of the other things we're looking at is space rationalization. So what if our space is rationalized in a different way? Can we still effectively timetable? We are also looking at it from an accessibility perspective at the same time. So how do we use AI for the benefit in those areas? Course searching. Many of our prospective students' first interaction with the university is course searching and program module guidelines and everything else. So how do we really make that more accessible and more exciting using some of these tools and technologies? Research Summary Digest. I was speaking with a fantastic executive dean who said, there are only 4 journals I actually read, which told me, oh God, why do we subscribe to all this content? But he was saying, but I can't keep up with even those 4 journals. And wouldn't it be great if I get a monthly summary of all new issues or articles that are published with, here are the key things, with a link that if I want to read more, I can just go and read that article afterwards. So we're going to do some experimentation on that, depending on what actually we can do with TDM licensing, etc. Another area we're looking at is ethical review support documentation. So if an ethics application has come in, can we generate some documentation out of it straight away from participant information, etc., just again streamlining some of those processes. And also matching of student aspirations to industry options. So we ask students a lot about what do you want to do, etc. So can we generate the right kind of opportunities for them? Can we match them? But can we also automatically tweak their CV to match to the kind of opportunities that might be out there? So it's more tailored and more personalized in that way to support them in getting job opportunities. So those are some of the use cases we're looking at it. But the key thing there is there's only probably one that you will link with library, and the rest are very much about the institution. And the thing, again, is the strategic positioning of library as an agent for digital transformation on this topic. Infrastructure and partnerships, just very briefly. So firstly, we've learned a lot from existing work. So Ithaka S+R reports, EAB, many other foundations that have done amazing amounts of work on what does it mean to understand researcher behavior, student behaviors, campus developments, but also AI product landscapes. Microsoft is a major player for us. And again, as I said, we've been working on Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses, but we are now looking at a small-scale trial of Copilot Studio and Microsoft Azure OpenAI, just so that we can do more of that. And the key thing I would say there is we are not a homogeneous unit, as would most of your organizations be. We'll have a set of people who will be super excited about doing state-of-the-art things, a lot of people in the middle who just want a Copilot license, and people who just don't want to touch AI. So it's trying to basically cater for all of those needs. We will be returning Digital Summit, this time again purely focusing on AI and research, and what would that mean for the future of research. We are also starting a journey of our own walled garden approach. So with sensitive data, what can we do in that? Do we accept Microsoft Azure OpenAI tenancy in the way that it's defined at the moment? Or do we do something like what Yale has done with Clarity or what Stanford has done? So we're looking at those elements as well. And at library level, we're working more closely with Northwestern University on AI. So again, Claire's got a very strong link and relationship there. We are also working with Victoria University, going back to that core purpose of knowledge and the future of knowledge. And we are also building conversations with University of Pretoria in South Africa and also with Chicago, which are just at these starting stages. And internally, we are really trying to build better partnerships with IT, with Digital Education Service, with ODPL, which is our Organizational Development and Professional Learning. I'm over time now, so I'm going to rush slightly. This is just a little video. So another thing that we are supporting as an institution working with Digital Education Service is student startups. So we have a student startup called Plateau, and that's integrated into Blackboard on how students are going to ask for questions in the future. They're not going to ask a librarian, can you tell me which book this information might be in? They'll be doing this kind of stuff, which is course details are there, module details are there, and they're basically saying, what can you help me with? They said, you can ask these kind of questions. I missed our lecture on memory management. What did we cover? And it will basically give, based on that data, appropriate responses. I hope it's visible enough. Apologies, it's quite tiny. And then the student might ask, actually, that's great, but how is this covered in the actual curriculum or the overall module? And then it will provide more detailed guidance on actually what you can do around that. But it's the third bit that I really, really like, which is about how do you revise for that, so which is just about to come. Because again, there's a lot of information coming through. And this is what I used to do for my presentations ages ago, which is, can you just make me flashcards for this? And it will be like, yeah, sure. And it will just generate a series of flashcards, and you can just test your knowledge on that. And that's happening in, what, less than a minute and a half. That's the kind of speed at which students are now generating this kind of knowledge. So I think we really need to think about how knowledge will be acquired and really start thinking about how our profession will change in supporting that kind of knowledge acquisition. Right, last slide. I just wanted to go back to that library's role in knowledge and not losing that core purpose. It might be AI now, it might be another digital technology in the future. Knowledge is our core mission. So we are going to host a major symposium on the future of knowledge on 27th of June. It will go out to all RLUK lists to join. If you can, it will also be live streamed. So if you can't come physically to Leeds, although it's a wonderful place to visit, you will have an option to stream and receive it online. As I mentioned, we launched our Digital Creativity and Cultures Hub, and we are also leading on the delivery of the Knowledge Equity Network. And if you're not aware of that, there's a link on the slide that you can have a look at. We are also leaders in user experience, and that's actually helped us a lot in setting an experiential lens on lots of these technologies. This is not about technology, this is the end user experience and what do they gain out of that. And last but not least, we are sponsoring the Leeds Institute for Teaching Excellence, which is our mainstream teaching institute in Leeds, a fellowship, an incubator rather than a fellowship on open and digital education, so that we can keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in those areas for now. Right, I will stop there, but just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. I'm going to hand over to Kevin, who is going to take us into more actual fun stuff rather than a case study. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Masood, both for that and also for inviting me here today. And I'm very grateful to be here. First, I'm a lifelong Beatles fan. I'm the youngest in my family. My older sister went and saw them live, and so it's first time to Liverpool, so it's very exciting in that. And I learned so much this morning, and it's just so valuable. So this is a little bit of art imitates life, or talk imitates life. Things are coming at us so fast. As you just saw, Masood went really fast, and I'm going to do the same. Really more material than we can cover here. so hopefully the slide deck will be valuable to you as we distribute it and give it to you all to have to go back on this talk when you look back on it as we go forward. Three things I'm going to do today very quickly. I'm going to talk a little bit about Ithaka S+R. And so first, I just want to say, for those of you who don't know, I'm the leader of Ithaka. I've been working in this territory since 1995. I'm co-founder of JSTOR, so have been through this evolution of technology and education for a long time. We're a not-for-profit, and our mission is to expand access to education. So I've lived through the transition from print to digital, and I would say that the transition in AI feels as potentially transformative as that time. Since that time, it's been kind of incremental, fast-paced. It's all felt really fast-paced, but it's been continuous improvement, continuous incremental improvement. This is something very, very different, discontinuous shift. And so in our mission of trying to be collaborative in the community, we're trying to use our services and our approach to help with that transition. So Ithaka S+R is one of our services at Ithaka, and it's got a focus on AI as part of what it does. And so I'll just kind of highlight for you a few of the things. This will be something you can go back to. These are links to different reports that Ithaka S+R is working on related to generative AI in higher education. A series of studies and surveys. These are US-based for the most part, all of which very focused on interviews and reactions of how people are responding to these technologies. These will be linked in the deck if you go and get the deck later. Some of the outcomes of the surveys that we're starting to see and the trends that we're seeing in teaching and learning. In the United States, 72% of post-secondary instructors have used generative AI, so people are experimenting with it, definitely, but they're hungry for best practices. They're not really incorporating them deeply into their courses. They're trying them out, but they're not ready to really commit to them. And in terms of student learning, the question of cheating or academic integrity remains a big concern. And I think a feeling that AI literacy is an important skill for students to have. These are the things that instructors and faculty are telling us about both the opportunities and the concerns that they see going forward. The nature of the product landscape, there are two things that we have. One of them is a product tracking tool, so you can see what new products are coming out in this area. It's so fast moving, it's so fast changing. And so there are three basic product types that we're seeing out in the community. Discovery type products, understanding type products like the one you just showed the quick demo of, and then the creation on the publishing side. And we're starting to see increasingly research agents in that territory. But some of the themes that are coming out that are giving highlight to what the challenges are vendors are really emphasizing trust, accuracy, and security in their products. It's becoming more and more important, I think, to educate faculty and students on the range of services available, because there's a wide range of services available, but OpenAI-related kind of products are continuing to dominate. And I think, as we see some of these big new partnerships being announced between universities and the big AI providers and LLM providers, really kind of staying on top of that and understanding where those are going to go. So, our Ithaka S+R side of the house is doing research and conducting research to try to help provide information, valuable information to you as you sort of look at the changing environment. We also have two practical or operational areas where we're actually working to implement these technologies in the services that we provide. The first is what we call the JSTOR research tool, and this is a ability to use generative AI as you're a student or a faculty member using JSTOR. Like everyone else, when ChatGPT came out in November 22, we saw the change coming, and I think the first thing that we were saying internally was, gee, if you don't offer a conversational engagement with a resource, the students or faculty are going to go elsewhere. You have to have a conversational engagement. So we began working right away on trying to develop the capability to make that possible on JSTOR, so that users could take advantage of these new generative AI technologies as they were using the resource. We took a group, put them aside to work on this, exclusively dedicated to this, and made a commitment to try to get a beta of that up and running in that first fall of 23, and we did that, and we've had that beta running for a little over a year and a half. We have over 100,000 users in that beta, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that beta, not to try to promote it. We're offering that as a free additional service on the platform, but rather to talk a little bit about giving you a sense of what it is. So what are some of the lessons we're learning from that? In the way that we implement it, we're very focused. We were very concerned about hallucination and other kinds of concerns in the community. So we're very focused on the actual content, focusing on the source. So the AI is built around the content to minimize hallucinations. And what I mean by that, this is the JSTOR interface. And if you look at the right side, you've got the left side, you've got the actual article. And on the right side, you have this area where you can use the generative AI enabled capabilities. The student can then ask questions, but they're only doing that with the content that they're working with right then, like that article. It's not the whole database. It's not going out to the world. It's just, I'm in this article and I want to engage with this article. So they can actually ask questions of the article, or they can determine what action they want to take next. They can get recommended topics for further research. And as I said, they can ask free-form questions like Q&A with the article. So they're like having a conversation with the article as opposed to just downloading it and reading it. Similar to what you just showed in the demo, Masood. And what kind of questions are people asking when they're in the article? A whole range of things. These are just examples of questions that come up. A faculty member will say, I'm going to give an in-class essay tomorrow. Give me some points from this article that I can emphasize in an in-class essay prompt. So the level of engagement that is happening in there, you have to think back to before this was possible. The level of engagement on a resource like a JSTOR or whatever was, hit the download button, right? I get an article, I hit download, I then read it offline. So there was no engagement before in these resources. And now there's engagement of the kind that you just saw, where people can have conversations with the content, engage with the content, summarize it, maybe summarize it in a different language if that gives them a better access to the content, maybe summarize it in a way, please summarize this at a secondary school level, an 8th grade level, whatever. All those things are possible. So you find that the novice researcher has less time finding the content, more time engaging and understanding, and greater discovery and conversations assist with exploration. And I think increasingly being able to navigate across disciplines and across jargons is a big part of what can happen through these technologies. What does that mean for you as a library? First, you may be wanting to implement these types of technologies in your own, chatbots and things in the library across your own resources. So one of the things is, how do you make sure that the quality of the responses are trustworthy? This is one of the things that we wrestle with. We include positive, negative ratings for the user to say, hey, was this a good answer to your question given the content? And then we also have various kinds of automated evaluation that we can use the AI to actually evaluate for harm and things like that. Another one is another part of the implementation challenges that we would face, and you would also face in this, is from a content creator owner point of view, there are a lot of things that concern the content creator and owner that we didn't necessarily anticipate. So, one level is the financial issue. Are we going to be compensated for this? Is this going to train an LLM model? And should they pay? So there's a part of that, and you may have those same questions as you think about your own content. But the second is kind of editorial control. An author doesn't want their article summarized in a particular way. Or a publisher is very concerned that their authors will be concerned about that. Or how is my content being misrepresented or mischaracterized? That is proving to be a huge issue. We really feel like that with the rights that we have with JSTOR, that we should be able to use the AI. We're not training the LLM. We're just using what they call RAG to be able to create creative prompts that make the content more usable and discoverable. But the publishers are saying, wait, we're not sure we want to allow you to do that, and we're concerned about the way the content is being represented. So, there are issues like that that you maybe not, you don't necessarily anticipate up front, and as you all work with resources to try to make them more accessible in this way, you could face those types of questions as well. And then, of course, there are the macro issues that are really difficult to address. As I mentioned, we're making this available without charge as part of our interface, but some of the libraries are saying to us, no, you don't turn that off. We don't want that research tool available to our students. There's no AI here. We don't allow AI of any kind in our library. Please turn that capability off. So that wasn't something that we necessarily anticipated. And then you have the macro issues around, environmental impacts, which we're all like, it's a little bit of a black box for us, and power consumption and issues around that, which are hard for us, at the very end of this stream to be able to answer, right? We can't move the needle on those. I think the thing that we all need to try to do is ask for and try to get more transparency. So how many cycles is this really costing? How are we impacting the environment with our tools? So now I'm going to shift from the sort of demand side of, how do users use AI, when they're trying to use a resource, and now shift over to what we call a collection processing tool, which is a Gen AI-enabled ability to process special collections. And what we're emphasizing here, we have had for some years capability to make our JSTOR infrastructure available to libraries for their special collections and primary source collections. The idea being that we can use the fact that students and researchers already go to JSTOR to have these primary source collections up alongside the secondary literature, so those can be linked together and make it for a better experience for users. So we've turned our infrastructure to libraries and said, we can host your special collections, we can help you preserve your special collections, we can help you manage them. And we've been doing that for some years. And sort of like what you said about the Microsoft Copilot, it's been kind of okay. We've been making those services available, but about a year ago, we went out to about 130 libraries, both around the world and in the United States, and we're talking to them about their special collections and how are they approaching this, and was this something that our services were valued? And we heard about a very fragmented environment of lots of different kinds of services, but what we heard from every single one was, we have a terrible problem with processing these collections. We have enormous backlogs, materials coming in digital form. We have very little inventory control over even the things that we have. And that was unanimous. Institutions would say we only, 5% of our collections are digitized. And so we started to think about whether what we were learning with generative AI could be applied to this area. And so how could we use generative AI to help with that backlog / inventory / stewardship of those collections? And so we took a group and put a big group aside to start working on that, about a year ago. And how could we use these technologies in a way consistent with our not-for-profit mission? I'm going to move a little bit more quickly just to make sure we reserve some time. But the idea here is that we, instead of the very time-consuming and manual process of having to have a human being sort through things as part of the digitization process and put metadata alongside that in order to make that content digitized, the idea is to shift that to where you just scan the data with no metadata and then use generative AI to read that content and then help process that content. And in doing that, the idea is not to replace the metadata archivist or librarian. It's to provide a service to make their work more valuable, to take them, if you will, up a level to the higher value and make it possible for the content to be processed, maybe 100 times faster or maybe even 200 times faster. And when I think about the amount of content that is currently in analog form or coming in digital form around the world, that is cultural heritage collections that right now are not being cared for, it's not possible to process them or get inventory control of them. And given the importance of what we heard this morning and the importance of cultural heritage resources, the ability to use technology to get more and more control of that, to be able to stewardship is becoming more important than it ever has been. And so, that's where we're coming from in trying to develop a not-for-profit service that can help serve this problem. Now, just a couple quick, examples. When you feed the data into these mechanisms, we're providing a context around that's driven by the kinds of values of the community and the technologies that are important to the community, and trying to work with the community in developing these systems. So, but when you put this through, an LLM, a lot of what can happen is automated through the LLM, and a lot of it is building a context around it. So here are just a couple of examples. This first example, you are able to read some of the description maybe, but we're structuring this to be able to both create the metadata to describe these items and descriptive information about the items in much more detail. So just some quick examples. That was an example of script. This is an example of a photo. And it can describe what the photo looks like, gives metadata, and I'm going really, really quickly. We work with the community to develop the metadata elements and to structure this, and iteratively to develop the capabilities to do this in a reliable way, working with both the metadata specialists, but also with the LLM providers. This is an example of a mixed media item where you have this is a textile with text and pictures on it, and it's able to both deal with information in a different language, translate that information, and again, what you need to create when you build these types of capabilities is the ability to check these items, to check them for quality, et cetera, as you're working through them, and have a system context around how the LLM is being used specifically for this application. So, one of the things that you find when you do this is something that had previously taken many, many hours to do as a first pass takes seconds to do. So the idea is not for this to be replacing that role, but rather for this to be something that positions that role to be able to do much, much more work, and to make it possible for cracking through these enormous backlogs that exist in libraries, and make that cultural heritage both get the control of it so it can be stewarded and preserved, but also as it moves into the digital realm, make it possible for that content to be accessible and used by the community. This is just one example of one of our test sites, an archivist that does this work, and how she has found this to be able to help her to do that work. So what are some of the challenges of these technologies? For this specific application that I was just talking about, the collections processing tool, working with a range of different control vocabularies and/or there's a lot of interest in, can we create a small language model, where just the content of our library can help to train this, so that when we are looking at the data that comes out and it's not right, we can keep getting better recursively. That's something that people want to see it do. Other things that are kind of earlier in a workflow that are not just about describing, collections, things like, do we see PII in this content, or does this match our collection development strategy, or are there copyright implications of this content? Wanting to see those types of things be a part of the process. A lot of questions always about the support for non-English languages in this. A lot of interest in audio video, which right now is just so expensive to process that it's not really on our short-term roadmap. But all of these types of challenges are things that you will face, and I'm sure many of your institutions are already testing out these types of tools yourselves for using an LLM against your own content or collections. And what we are eager to do is to be able to share what we're learning as you are doing that. And as Masood was saying, there may be ways, obviously, for us to work collaboratively and jointly on all of this. And clearly, we're developing a service in this area. We would obviously looking for support for that. But at the same time, there's much that we can learn about, even if you're not licensing that service or not engaged in that service, jointly about how these problems are being dealt with and addressed. So just to close up, some of the questions that are coming up, specifically around the collection processing tool, one of the big questions is, item level metadata versus collections or file level metadata. Processes and procedures have evolved in the community because it's a very constrained opportunity to be able to categorize and catalog these items, that they've been cataloged at the sort of much more general level. So workflows don't really fit the idea of having metadata and descriptions for every item. That's something that's now conceivably possible if it's managed the right way. So how do we think about that? And can it be possible that libraries can do some quick triage to do digitization first and use these tools to do a lot of the work that has been done by humans before? Also, a lot of metadata has already been processed. Can these tools be used to look at these metadata for biases or for things that may have been not anticipated in previous iterations? Can we now use these technologies to reassess those data? How important in the end will metadata be for discovery is a really important question. I mean, as these AI tools become more and more semantic, what is this content about as opposed to the literal metadata we might establish with it? Can semantics make it possible for these new types of search abilities to be used that completely make the metadata in effect long run irrelevant? So the other thing I'll say is just it's amazing how fast the user behaviors change. On the case of Google, we all lived through Google starting to be the way that people found things. Recently with the introduction of generative AI, some of that usage is going to the Perplexities of the world or the ChatGPTs of the world. And in addition, Google has put its own overview feature, that AI feature. So consequence of that is people don't actually go to the sites as much. It used to be you do search Google, you get a list of sites, you click on them, and so you go to them. Well, now you don't have to do that if all you're looking for is an answer. Now in our community, people need citations, they need to know where things came from. So it's probably a little bit less in our community than in some others, but fundamentally, fewer people are following that pathway. So what does that mean, for your resources? If you're using, a variety of different ways through your catalog or whatever for people to get access to the materials, the behaviors are changing. And finally, just in terms of, as soon as you start to make progress in one area, these deep research agents, I don't know if you're following that area, but agents that get created to do really intense sort of research across the web. I'm a faculty member and interested in a particular area. I established a relationship with this robot, and this agent will then go out around the world and find all the information relevant to me and bring it back to me. Increasingly sites are probably going to have some API or some way of receiving those agents, talking to those agents, much in the way that people did search engine optimization with Google search and all of that. So, an evolving world, we're eager to share what we're learning as we keep going. This is a very quick overview of some of the things that we're doing, and I'll pass it back and open it up for questions for a few minutes. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jane Harville, University of Sussex. It's a question for Masood, but before I do, I just wanted to say, Kevin, I've just going backwards and forwards with our collection manager. We've had a lot of stuff on your site already, and I know that he is very pleased with how it's going, and he's about to do some live testing as well with your collections processing tool. So I just wanted to say that, and it's great to have it laid out for me. But Masood, brilliant, big up to get in the centre of all the AI conversations because it's difficult in the universities. I just wonder if you could, is there anything you're doing around assessment? Because assessment is the thing that's causing the issues in our institution. Our academic misconduct panels are up tenfold, and that's, it's what goes on before that. Is there anything that you're doing to influence assessment with the rise of Gen AI? How do you measure the learning?
I, on purpose, didn't talk about assessments because every institution is doing assessments, really. It's a tough one because there is no real way to distinguish at this time on what's plagiarized and what's not. We're doing a lot of positive reinforcement at the moment on what does it mean to be a more critical thinker and be a more educated citizen. I think that's one area that we are doing. We are also shifting some of the assessment methodologies.
Yeah.
So instead of doing essay-based assessments, we're going more pragmatic, synoptic assessments, more mid-module assessments on learning outcomes. We are also looking at changing the rubrics for how learning outcomes are assessed in the first place. We're also linking some of this with marking and assessment. So for those who have large Russell groups, often find that's one of the poorest NSS scores that we get. So we're looking at how do we automate some of the feedback mechanisms for improving better feedback. And last but not least, there's a lot of discussion around how do we move simply into a different form of assessment. And one of the things we are changing is moving away from what we call OTLAs, which is online time-based learning assessment, to more synoptic assessments in that regard. So yeah, big topic, no clear answers, but lots of work going on.
Hi both, Paul Stokes, JISC. I've got 4 questions, very quick, short answers, hopefully. Okay, Masood, you mentioned a 30% or less efficiency gain. How did you measure that? What were you talking about? That's the first question. The second one was there any pushback from IT when you got the money for your thing? Then on the JSTOR side of things, are the recommendations inside JSTOR only, or do they go outside of JSTOR to get further recommendations? And the last one is, you skated past the environmental impact side of it. Have you any idea at all what the environmental impact is of what you're doing?
Okay, I can answer the 2 very quickly. So when we did the pilot, we defined how we were going to assess this, and we gave a questionnaire and did monthly surveys with all the users who were using it on, has it improved your efficiency? Do you feel that your productivity has increased? How are you using it? We also did some background analytics on how much they have actually used the tools. And Microsoft original reports claim between 20 to 30%. Our data indicated between 7 to 8%. So that was the assessment methodology. And we've published, not visibly, but within the institution, a report around how that's gone. So that's how we assessed that. And on IT side, actually, no, because it wasn't a library thing in the first place. The culture is built as a joint effort around that, so that wasn't an issue.
So on the JSTOR questions right now, the recommendations are within the JSTOR interface. I mean, and in fact, the Q&A, just to reconfirm, is actually only in the article. But when you go to other recommendations, it goes around to the JSTOR database. And yes, I did skate through the environmental piece. Right now, honestly, the amount of usage that we're getting of these at this point is very low. So the relative impact, from environment or power thing is low. But I think the key that we all need to sort of press for is more transparency. And so we don't know the answer to that question. It's something that we're sort of working on. And so we want to know, like, for every transaction, how much does it take? And we can add that up. And as we grow, or as more and more of this use happens, we can start to be able to recognize what that is. But right now, we don't have that answer.
Simon.
Thanks, William. Simon Baines, University of Aberdeen. Question for Kevin, I think. A lot of the conversation over the last few days about AI is how we grapple with it, how we educate our users, doing all the things librarians do to try and understand and support our users when they're using knowledge and exploiting it. So it's a little bit depressing to hear, one of the things you said was that you've got libraries saying, we don't want that in our libraries, switch it off. So I wonder if you could unpack that a little bit. Is that saying something about some of our professional colleagues, or is it saying something about the organisations they're working within and their approach to it? Are there examples you can share of that? Thank you.
I don't really know the motivation, and I think one of the things that we've always really tried to work to do is to provide choice and options for things. So this is one of the issues that just has come up. That in the process of starting to roll this out and communicating to the community, we've had some institutions come back and say, yeah, we're not allowing any AI on our campus at all. I don't have the sense that that's a library decision, but it's something that you now asking the question, we can inquire further if that's over time helpful for us to be able to share. But also, I think in addition, there's just general fear. I mean, some people may say they make a decision about the environmental impact. They say, we don't want to be a part of that, or we think that this is something that, is potentially dangerous or damaging. But I think, on both sides, there's a lot of combination of, fear or just uncertainty around it. So we see that on the publisher side as well. Very strong, broad characterizations, and when we explain actually what we're doing, we're able to overcome in most cases. I think when we really explain the approach that we're taking, some libraries will say, well, we're not allowing this, but we say, but look, we're only doing this within the article. We're helping the student be able to understand the article better, and they can actually make that article more accessible to them. They could play it in audio. There are lots of different things, and so I think when people hear more, I think that there is a tendency to react to the broader concerns they may have about AI and not necessarily understand the way it's being implemented in this particular case. So I think that it'll take time to people to get comfortable with that and understand that, but that's my sense.
We have time for just one last question before some closing comments from Masood and just finishing up.
So this is a two-part question for both of you. Sorry. On transparency and accountability. So I found both of your demos really impressive. With the collection description, for obvious reasons, you didn't show what the training data for that is. And one of the good things I think about digital formats is the change in format can foreground that somebody interpreted that information and there might be biases there. So what are you doing to kind of actively show that? Because currently, if there were something either inaccurate or just insensitive in that, how would you show who was accountable to that? And similarly, the Plato, I found that very impressive, but I worry that sort of thing might become recursive, as in a student could use that for everything and then eventually get to a situation in their life where they can't use the AI and they don't like the skills. And I wondered to what extent you're worried about the sort of things you see occasionally of students suing their university if they failed their degree because they got to a point where they were tested and they couldn't use AI, and they turn around and say, you didn't give me the skills that you need. And who would you blame in that situation? Because you can't blame the AI itself.
So simple, quick questions for simple, quick answers.
Olivia, why? I will take the second one first, just because I'll be quick. What we are focusing on is holistic learning here. And one key element of that is technology-driven learning. So we're not going to shy away from this because that is what people will do in industry and in other places. So what we do need to do is complement that with critical thinking skills, with information evaluation skills, etc. Also, Plato is a startup, so we're learning. This is not a defined thing that we'll implement it in this way. So this is basically how do we grab it and learn from it. In terms of suing, I think as some of us are already probably in the class action lawsuit that's being conducted on other reasons. So universities are not new to that. But at this time, I really honestly can't answer that one.
So, Kevin, do you have any quick thoughts?
I think that I was going to pull up that slide that was about that question really quickly. I think one of the questions I would say about that is that the assessment has to catch up with the reality, right? So to some degree, the assessment, to the degree it doesn't allow somebody to be able to use the web or tools or whatever, it's kind of not, it's a bit artificial in a way. But I think that's a continuing challenge in terms of what are the skills that people have to develop in the future world. But on this question of the bias, et cetera, so there are two things that we're trying to do that everyone will want to think about doing. Like, so there's a human intervention, right? When we're creating these metadata go into a database and you can see them. So you can evaluate whether or not they are aligned. Now, if you have to evaluate each one at the same level, you're not actually saving the resources if you're actually having to evaluate them at the same level you were before. So there are some ways that you can sort of get to whether something appears to be accurate, appears to be biased, et cetera, with a human being who's a specialist in that. So So there's a human process, but then there's also increasingly evaluative tools that we're able to use. There are tools that sort of assess the question of whether there is language that looks like it's harmful language or toxic language. And those are not perfect, but you can launch those tools against the data to get an answer. And usually what it's going to give you is a score, a relative score. So, some of the things as those tools are more and more reliable, high score things, you're going to say, hey, I feel comfortable with those. Lower score things, we need to go back and look at them. So I think there's a combination of tools that can be used to evaluate these things in a way that's never been possible before, right? So we have bias and we have toxicity in the historical metadata. That's been well documented by people. And we know that each individual doing that work is going to have their biases, et cetera. So the question is, can we use these tools to continuously kind of interrogate these materials and improve them over time? And if they can do that in a way that's extremely affordable, we're going to have more opportunity to continuously refine and improve these materials over time. So I think it's both, like a lot of technologies, it's both a huge opportunity and a concern. And so, how we deploy them and what we use to make them effective is going to determine whether it's going to be positive or it's going to be a negative challenge.